because oh, here you go,
I was going to
recording.
say,
That's
Froge, yeah,
right.
Froge just messaged me actually. So
Hey,
Hey,
we're just amusing ourselves here.
what time did we have? I thought it was supposed
we
to
were,
be in 5 minutes, but anyway, I'm glad you're here. Thank you very, very much.
yeah, time zones.
Yeah, we
Time
figured
zone.
you were an hour off, and we kind of just hung out and said, "Okay, we're gonna have chit chat about stuff." Well,
Good.
we're
Please
sitting here.
do continue. I'm going to make my coffee ready while you do.
All right. What time is it there?
It's 5 to midnight.
Oh, okay.
We are in Tokyo now. It's kind of an amazing place. It's the family home. Let me just show you actually briefly. Turn this blurriness off.
You
Uh,
posted something on YouTube, uh, but the best of both worlds about 12 hours ago.
yeah, that was yes. You see this? It's just so
Oh, that's a nice
beautiful.
family home.
Yeah, just beautifully made, very traditional. Yeah, no, the Best of Work Worlds is a brief presentation that I'm very eager to give to you to kick off today. But we're in the middle of talking something I would love to hear first.
We're riffing on AI, and well, I guess we could start. We're talking about knowledge nuggets and what those little things in VR. I commented about wiki pages being something you could glance at. It's a small piece of text that has one thing and it's related to the other ones by manually generated links.
Hmm.
People cross-linking through, uh, you know, versus generating a concept map and blowing that out, which is kind of AI generated, useful still, but and then we started to go into, well, what about programming things with and how programming languages, because of the rigor, AI is a lot more successful at generating programs that run. But the fact that they run does not mean they do the correct things. So you can get it's like it compiles, it doesn't do what you want. So
Yeah,
we were
that's
talking over experiences inferred and our direct experiences trying to do things with it.
a good point.
Expanded search gives you
Yeah,
examples.
yeah, yeah. It's kind of interesting. We'll start properly in 3 minutes in case somebody else joins us. With AI and all of that stuff. As you know, I make music summaries and a few other things. And we've been driving a lot with the family all over the place, and they've been playing this, to my ears, incessantly loud and bad Japanese pop in the background in the car. And I'm just thinking, in terms of medium, the stuff that we generate with AI, um, where there is an intention of having some meaning behind the lyrics and so on, it is not better than that kind of pop music, but it is its own thing, I think. Like photography didn't kill painting, very different things. So the fact that we have this profusion of potential now is just really, really interesting. I feel less defensive about experimenting with music, is what I'm saying.
It's, drum machines and versus drummers.
That's a very
A lot
good
of, a lot
point.
of, a lot of work for drummers kind of dried up because you can just get a drum machine to do the riffs in the background. And as a composer, you can do this all by just touching your keyboard and have your control panel in front of you.
Yeah, that's a good point. Right. Just gonna check. Brandel, which percentage are you still there? Oh, okay. Um, just to tell you in terms of so Author now is fully available in the App Store. The guys are now working on the nodes, which is a big deal. So in literally 1 minute, I'll show you a little bit what I mean by that. But the topic of today, after I do the brief introduction to one point, really is what we discussed last time, which is this is not reading or writing. What is it? it's a really exciting topic. And it allowed me to partly go in the opposite direction to a lot of the thinking we've done before, to go a lot less speculative, a lot less fanciful. And I think we need to do that, but just for fun in this episode. Okay, I'll tell you what. Any last comments before we dive into that?
It's 11 o'clock.
And there it's official from someone's Zoom in the world. Okay, share screen for a bit. So this presentation is for you guys. It's also, just make sure I have you in the side. It was also intended for the fruit company, as we mentioned. This is so weird. I'm in full screen. I can't see you. Please do interrupt me if you have any questions. I can't see any hands or anything. Can you see the shared screen well?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, cool. So this really goes into, but also if someone new joins, please tell me so that I can say hi and keep that in mind. It goes into what Ken Perlin has been talking about and what Tess has been talking about. Why would anyone work and what, right? So a key conundrum is that computer displays are pretty darn good. Like the one I'm using right now has the nano coating and everything. It's absolutely fantastic. So why would anyone want to work in XR? Right? One answer is you have the virtual displays. And that's not just okay. It's not just good. It's actually super important to have. But what I'm talking about here is not having one display, but having many, many displays. And as you guys very well know, the notion of having stuff on screen that can be folded into nodes. Then you can interact with them, like you're talking about earlier, Peter, knowledge objects, right? You can move them, see relationships, all of that good stuff. So this is, of course, what's been prototyped in Author already. So you have these little guys, and you can do fun and interesting stuff, but it really matters what's inside these things. And the crucial thing is, if you take the full information and make it small, if you can then open it back up again, you get the best of both worlds, right? It's like almost like having many virtual displays. And when you have a big view, you still have all the other nodes available as context. So that's where I jokingly say, so getting the best of text on Surface and text in space is the best of both worlds and the best of both words. And to discuss what this would mean, what kind of stuff should be available in these things, and also what should the interactions be? That was the full discussion. So the point is, we discussed last year a bit about how damaging in terms of imagination it is to have virtual screens, which I still think can hold us back. It's so annoying getting this AI critic note taker. I've tried to get rid of it. It keeps popping up. Right. Yes, it can be damaging for our imagination, so to speak, but just being able to, when you work in a headset and you have this virtual display, it's fantastic and it's real and it's yours. So why don't we just allow it to be many, so to speak? I'm talking in circles here and it's midnight, so please ask me questions or go in a different direction.
I I really like that. One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about recently is the integrity of the document and the way that we have such a well-founded relationship of a one-to-one with a surface to a document, an object to a document, and how well that serves us for being able to kind of equate them. Whereas in a browser window, for example, these days, a browser window has no particularly hard-bound guarantees from 1 minute to the next what content is within that sort of spatial bounds and spatial sort of lines in which it sort of occupies. And I wonder what alternatives there might be as mechanisms for kind of representing things, and so that's, and to some extent when you're writing, you are still more kind of closely related to what the text is on a thing, but even scrolling a page has serves to sort of break down the integrity of the bounds of a document so that you don't know that this word is here. So I think that sort of having the ability to manipulate the position and location of more or of a range of smaller, more free-floating documents that have those internal integrities to them would be a really interesting thing to explore. So I do like that aspect.
I'm going to close two doors that I saw are open. I think, Randall, you are spot on. There's a joke in a movie, can't remember the movie, but somebody says something clever. Someone else says, how do you know that? And then they say, oh, well, they hide that stuff in books. And it's meant, that person doesn't read books, but I also see it as, it literally is. If you're looking at one page of a book, you don't know what's on the other pages. So, like with scrolling, just 1 second. So sliding doors in this house, it's so cool. Japanese craft. Yeah, so the idea here is I'm a bit obsessive over working on something between a laptop and a desktop screen when you are doing serious reading and writing. Very much, Brandel, for what you're talking about of it's all there within eyes reach and having means to break things up. Now, another question is, what should be in these nodes? Should it be a concept? Should it be a paragraph? Should it be a section with a heading? What kind of stuff should it be? Jonathan, by the way, please go ahead. And first of all, where are you?
I'm in Cambridge train station. So at some point I'll have to dive up. For what it's worth, I realised I'm just down the road from ARM, as in ARM processors.
Oh, cool.
Offices down there, because they started out. I used to know some of the guys who started out in the 80s here, so they're still here, but Japanese owned, I think. I was going to mention, to answer your question, Zettelkasten, which is, I think, not something that ever comes up in these discussions. Do you know what I mean? So this is a note-taking method.
Mhm.
It was developed in the middle of the century. Some people kind of really obsess about it, and there are, and it involves a supposedly fairly rigid methodology of how to take notes, and they are, as we've been discussing, as Brandon's been talking about, short. That each note is meant to be a short thing. I think it's meant to be actually short, but originally it says you could write it on an index card, and I think there are prescriptions as to what kind of thing each card is meant to contain. I don't think they prescribe that it should be like a sort of object as in a named thing. It should be a concept, but roughly speaking, it's the same kind of thing that you would find in a Wikipedia page. So a date, place, so slightly wider concepts or something you can probably summarize in a few words. And then below it, you have the whatever you have to say about it. And then there's different classifications of them, like, is this an argument? Is it a theory? Is it a factual information? Or whatever, and you link them together in prescribed ways. So it's kind of both very free-ranging and also very rigid. You have to put within. You can fit very general information within this rather rigid scheme.
That's really wonderful, Jonathan, and I look forward to seeing that in the transcripts.
There are apps specifically for doing it. I have one which is called something beginning with Z. I've just played with it. I don't know. It's called Zettler, Zettler. It's a bespoke free app. But you can do the same thing in Evernote or Ulysses, which is the notes taking app I use. I think pretty much anything which has got bi-directional linking will allow you to just set up a network of information in that way. One day I will put all of my information into the form of a Zettelkasten. But it's one of the things when you read a description of how you're meant to actually do it, it's meant to basically fundamentally it's originally designed for researchers, academic researchers, and so it's got kind of categories separating the idea of you reading something in a paper or snippets of a paper and putting that information in. So that's one sort of type of thing. Another type of thing is your own thoughts on it, and maybe another type of thing is something you're actually writing yourself. And there are ways that you link these things together. But whenever I try to just start one as an experiment, I've never quite understood the categories or never quite felt they corresponded to what I'm doing. Because, you know, the kind of things I have in notes are things like to-dos, you know, and so on. And there isn't an obvious way of getting that into the system. So I think a lot of people have, you know, modified the system.
It's really interesting that you bring that up because the Zettelkasten comes up in the community every once in a while, but
Right.
your issues are some that I completely agree with. Maybe one interesting thing we should try to do is reinvent it. Something like the Zettelkasten, but for this kind of thinking. So Peter,
Of course, there's HyperCard as well, which I never use, but people used to swear by it. I think it's now, Randall will certainly know, I think it's now dead unless someone has revived it as an app. But of course, it was what to some people it was almost the killer feature of the original Mac. I don't know if that's an exaggeration. Some people very much use it. You know, obviously the early Macs. I remember them rather limited software available for a couple of years, and some people used it as a sort of, I suppose, a sort of database or even like a wiki using HyperCard. And some people built their business databases, you know, customer databases and so on using HyperCard. I don't know, people found thousands of uses for them, but never having properly used it myself, I couldn't really speak. But again, the idea was, isn't it a fundamental idea? Was there a fixed size of dialog box basically, and you could put information on there, or you could make it interactive by putting buttons on there as well. But it was all a case of condensing it down. And if you want to expand beyond that, you did that via some kind of, yeah, effectively links. I don't know what I'm talking about because I've only really read about it.
Well, it was constrained by
Yeah.
the Mac screen being that tiny. You could only do an index card's worth of stuff and have it readable. So it was a wonderful constraint that made hyperlinking and a lot of the things that HyperCard did well necessity to get anything done on it. And it turned out to be liberating in a lot of ways. I mean, it basically led to a lot of ideas about what you could actually do with the web, you know, versus kind of, you know, Ted Nelson dreaming about stuff. It's like you can do all this, but this is something concrete that actually got something done.
Yeah. So HyperCard, as I understand it, was again, I also never used it because I used a PC until I came to Apple. But it was a very had a very natural language. It wasn't even small talk, I don't think. I think it was even more natural language than small talk in a lot of places, right? And then you linked hyper cards together. For the most part, it was transitions between cards rather than very much in the way of animation between them, within them. And you I actually don't know what the scope of the animation within them was, but yeah, it was. Um, oh yeah, hyper talk. That's right, because I know that um, that Brett Victor used real talk as his language within his system because of an homage to all of the different talk things. Okay, so there was some sort of mathematics and stuff like that, and some notion of variables, but yeah, it was mostly about these transitions between things, and I think that's reasonable. But yeah, to the point about the real estate of the Macintosh, it was so constrained, and that general HCI notion of focus plus context means that we were absolutely starved for the context of each card by virtue of being sort of displayed one tiny sort of high resolution pixel grid of one card at a time. And I feel like that's the main thing, to your point, Frodo, about monitors is like a monitor is focus, but it's still never been context. And so if you can do the slightest thing to the notion of context as well as the focus, then that's what VR is for.
Yeah, I remember earlier today I brought up with Bruce Horn in the beginning of the Vision Pro being available. Not sure why we talked about it, but for some reason we did. Instead of having virtual screens in the Vision, it would be nice if documents were free floating, which they are not. What I'm talking about here is not quite that, but it's the same kind of logic. Now, but one thing I'm going to show you, I came across this on the internets the other day, and the guy Ravi Krishnan, who I'm not sure what he does, but he works on this. He would love to present to us, but the problem is he's in Australia, so he's in the same time zone that I'm now, so that doesn't work. But it's like a completely the same thing that I'm building, but in a very different take, which is fantastic. So it's let's see if there's any images here. It's Mac based, but it also has a Vision client. Let's see, yeah, so in space. It's a shame. I saw a video on here I wanted to share with you guys. But it is very much based on using space and also using AI for some of the layouts and questions, which is very powerful. So if I can figure out something time-wise, he'll present to us. Now, it's kind of funny when I hear the keywords you're talking about. So Jonathan, you brought up Zettelkasten and HyperCard. I can almost imagine the song that'll mention this now. Peter recently, as in Peter Wasilko, there was a line in one of our transcripts about can you live in a library?
Looks like he's got some good ideas here.
Yeah, so yeah, no, it's really interesting. But anyway, the can you live in a library was very Peter Wasilko, so I thought that was quite cute. Yeah, thank you for putting the link up there. So the thing is, would people work in something if it doesn't produce a product at the end of the day is an important question. A lot of these thinking apps don't, and it's probably fine. HyperCard, you could create stacks, and then you could even sell these stacks. So you could do all kinds of database and other things. But when you get to what's the name of some of these modern management systems, Obsidian and so on, really impressive stuff. But it's just for you.
Notion is another one which is
Notion, you said, yes.
quite
exactly.
similar, and there's another one beginning with R. Very similar, kind of customizable. Like you can set up your own kind of dashboard, for your life is how they tend to be presented. But and my understanding is, again, that's how a lot of people use HyperCard. You
Yeah,
just put everything in there and then put buttons on it, and then they could input information as well as in a database-like way, as well as human information.
because one of the things we talked about, I think, last session before that was thinking of how we frame what people do, and we talked about if you call it writing a note, it's kind of throwaway. But if you use language like you're writing an article, then there's a little bit more thought and structure because you expect you or someone else to read it in the future, right? So I'm wondering if one of the things we may have to do is to slightly modify Zettelkasten, look at the literal framing of HyperCard, but also the language around what the heck someone would bother put on a headset to do, right? Is it, I mean, we've used grand terms in the past, and I like them for their realities, but marketing-wise, so to speak, to convince people to use this, I think is a bit too much, like knowledge structures, knowledge sculptures, all of that stuff. I think these are correct terms, but they are highfalutin and off-putting, I think. Do you guys have any thoughts into the language of, let's say, there exists a thing you put on your headset, data you have on your computer is now available, but it's specialized. What do we call that? What would you call that to a friend to persuade them to do it? I think that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, this is where our maybe our priorities diverge. In that, I just want to build the web. I want to make sure that these are even if they aren't highfalutin, and I don't need anybody to pay for my app because my app is just the web. But I do think that once we get that, once we have the ability for people to broker these relationships between documents on the web, then that will make everybody else's sort of modalities more valuable. But my goal is just like, so it maybe for me they're just pages, but yeah, for the integrity of the page to be kind of meditated on a little bit more, to make sure that what connotatively comes out of page, out of this idea of a page, is something that's much more significant than simply being on geocities.com, and the relationship between the things that spring out of that. Like, something that I've thought about is, it's still expensive, but imagine if every single browser link was open in a new window, what that would do to your workflow and how you felt about things. Yeah, like, then those pages, there would be an integrity to them. There would be a sense in which you would be a little bit more reluctant, perhaps, to open a new window, because the window, because it would be generating a new page in some sense, and it would be kind of up to you to kind of be responsible for the management of all of these little fragments. But yeah, like, I I understand that the dignity and the integrity of something from a more serious sort of application where people are paying for it is an important thing. But I think that it's general enough that it would be interesting to think about it in a sort of a cheap as free way as well.
So, Brandel, let me question your language there. So you say you just want to make the web or invent the web, and then you use the term pages. Considering what you said earlier today, in a sense, would your idealized web be pages that are not scrollable? Because currently we don't have web pages, we really have web scrolls.
Yeah, no, that's a good point to be caught out on. I don't know, because a scroll, as well as a tab, in various forms. HyperCard could be considered more like tabbing than scrolling because it didn't have scrolling documents. Um, but those were two desperate strategies for coping with information that simply wouldn't survive being compressed into a single domain, into a single kind of rectangular boundary. And so while it's going to be hard to shake people of the habit of scrolling documents once they have an unlimited pixel grid on their face, it's worth thinking about whether it is the right answer. And yeah, I would like to try to think a little bit more about that, because like I was saying, like even a word processor, if you have a Word document, I've got a 200-page Google Google Doc with my wife of all of the email correspondence over the years that we've had to try to help each other with, to proofread and punch up. And yeah, like that it's sort of such an unordered mess is unfortunate, and sort of fighting against that would be pretty useful.
So this brings up something really, really important point. I had the pleasure of having a meeting and a dinner with Masaki Hagino of Voyager Japan last week. Voyager used to be part of Voyager with Bob Stein publishing CD-ROMs and all of that stuff. Now they do EPUB books, mobile phone books in Japan. And I see the comments here. We need to go into that. But for a specific thing, I just want to show you. So he presented the thing that's on the left here. I've just added, because I got so inspired, the thing on the right. So he called it subtitle design or subtitle text because it's small, like you would have in a movie. I prefer the name haiku design, because look at that. There's only 1, 2, or 3 lines of vertical text in an ebook. So imagine this is your iPhone or whatever phone, right? You can easily go page to page. I thought it was insanely beautiful when he presented that. And he said it's important in a way for your mind to be able to refresh. When you constantly scroll, you don't get to do that. So that really goes into our discussion of what to put in space. He puts it on little phones. We're wondering what to put in space, right? To have a definitive statement visually available. Now, Peter Dimitrius, or Peter D, for the record, the moving closer scrolling Ken thing, I agree, has a lot of benefits. What I'm thinking about here, though, is explicitly very large or tiny, with no real intermediate size. And the reason for that is there are very different uses and affordances. And even though I talk a lot about physically walking through the information, I do acknowledge that often you have to be sitting, whether it's at your desk or whether you are in a train or a plane or whatever. You move the whole environment. So the notion with the presentation at the beginning really is when you open it up, it's almost like you have your whole computer screen. So this is the one thing I want Apple to help with the Vision OS, to allow controls and so on to be attached to objects, not just to a toolbar. So you can get more stuff while you're there. That was just a kind of an underlining point. But yeah, what to show is a big deal. And also, in terms of the product, now, Brundle, obviously, even we're talking about web, we're talking about private versus public. You want to be able to play with stuff privately and then choose to public, even if it's web, of course. In terms of the actual construction, in terms of what's happening here, I have to do the cheapest solution, which is to use whatever infrastructures are available. So I just use iCloud and documents and so on. But there still is a question of what the nodes can be, because currently Vision OS does not allow an app to open other documents other than using the open dialog box. which means that these individual nodes cannot be individual documents. So I know in terms of our imagination that doesn't matter, but in terms of implementation right now it does. It can be sub-documents inside a document. But let's say all of this kind of works, guys. So I have a question for you. If we go with the premise that what we're trying to do here is a system for thinking primarily beyond reading or writing, as in you are not necessarily wanting to publish this, you may. What kind of thinking are we talking about? Learning a new subject in university, or what kind of thing? What could
think that's
compel you? Sorry, Peter, please go ahead.
that's true of any tool. I mean, if you're trying to study something new, but you need a syllabus. You need a teacher to kind of help point you in the right direction, whether it's a virtual teacher, whether you go to someone and say, hey, let's talk about this. But these virtual conversations you try to have if you're in these standalone environments, you're building it yourself. It's just for you. You're not really interacting with other people. It's not Second Life or anything like that, where you get multiple people in your environment. The model you put together is, what are you going to do with those hypercard links or those web links or the node links? You can auto-generate stuff, do like Notebook LM and explode diagrams out of it and move the nodes around and cluster them manually by your own criteria. Or you let the AI do it, or you let your classification algorithms do it, and you just generate new graphs all the time. So you're blowing nodes out here and nodes out there. But I think you got to have kind of a goal in mind. If you're just doing Zettelkasten, I'm just collecting bits and putting them together and threading them. That's a good way to learn stuff, good way to pick up stuff. If you're that kind of person, there are other people who have different learning modes. So I think that the techniques that you support are going to be interesting to see where someone goes. I mean, I'm certain HyperCard had a lot of hype around it, but people did some wonderful things in that little limited world. I mean, eventually it got supplanted, of course, but I'm not sure we have, I don't know, scratch your itch. Sort of it. I mean, you're trying to make a product too, and you got constraints on life and time. But I'm thinking, if you can scratch the itch, it says, what do you need to write to do the thing you need to do? You need to write a book. You need to write a paper for a conference. Okay, make that your story. In an agile sense, the story, the thing you're going to develop for, and make that scenario work. But I don't know. I haven't seen a list of those yet that say, well, I want to make an academic paper. I'm going to make a story. I'm going to make a bunch of blog entries that I want to time out. I want a bunch of YouTube videos that spit out over time because I'm an engaged person and I want to kind of do my blogosphere kind of stuff where I eke out information over time because that gets me clicks and views and I make money on it or whatever. Also gives people time to digest what you say.
There's
I mean,
questions. Brandel, please continue.
Yeah, that Peter, that distinction between something that you want to do to think with and something that you want to teach with is an interesting one. And being able to build an instrument that you have the ability to kind of describe and present a certain thing with is cool. Like the role that Prezi had for a lot of people in terms of being able to construct a knowledge space or a knowledge object that could be kind of performatively revealed and progressively revealed was really interesting. I've been really impressed of late with a handful of YouTubers who have kind of treated their space like mostly for humorful purposes, but actually, Bill Wirtz. It's a long time ago now, but Bill Wirtz's History of Japan. I keep tabs on Bill Wirtz a lot. He has a really really interesting use of space and color and direction and intention. So the invasion of different parts of Japan by other parts of Japan. He has a world history video as well. And those are really interesting as uh, indicators of the way that somebody might kind of point with with a presentation. I've also been thinking a lot about how a lot of the time what we're describing, what was that? I was listening to something, and it was just really clearly directional information. This thing was east, this thing was north. Um, and the times when those things are really, really clearly sort of geospatial and directional is a time when being able to have that information live like that is also really cool without it having to be more than that. You know, like you don't need to have a full feature length movie kind of AI generated object in order to be able to say this is north and this is east. Something that Edward Tufte is very proud of is that spark line idea of just being able to show an unannotated time series as a gesture, as a phrase, indicating something being kind of bumpy or existing with a relative stability with a followed by a precipitous drop or some kind of enormous increase in value in the numerical sense rather than the monetary. And yeah, like so, I think that there's a ton of um, ways in which things can be very gently and lightly transposed into the kind of form they are. Um, I think that being able to kind of orchestrate the revelation, the revealing of different bits and pieces across a space is a really interesting thing. Um, and yeah, those are slightly beyond what we were already talking about, but I think that they're interesting enough to throw into the mix. But I agree with Peter. Like we need to have domains, but I do think that it's possible to just like pick one almost at random and go like, well, what might we do with that, and just start playing.
So one thing that I do regarding this is I write in the author journal to figure things out, and then I mess it up, and then maybe later down I put a heading, and then I write something a bit better. I find it extremely useful. Um, how to put that in a way, even if we should, for someone else to do and for them to be, for it to be useful. Not part of the notion is exactly what we've been talking about, which is the scrolling. You write stuff, you think, we've all done it, and then you keep writing, and the earlier thoughts are now off the screen, they're gone, right? So what might be an amazing thing if we introduce, so to speak, the notion of writing a thought piece, as in something solid, but as you mess it up and you just keep writing, you can tear it off as a sheet in space, right? And then you can say after a while, now this is the one that's kind of the summary. All the ones over there, they are behind this. Almost literally, 3D stack them behind. It's like this is the stuff that went into the thinking, because that may then relate to the other issue, which is where do you put the research? I'm sure we all, to different degrees, use AI for research now. I use Claude a lot. And when something interesting comes up, I always ask for the original citation plus BibTeX. So I have that. I don't want to throw that away just because it came out of a discussion with Claude, but I don't want it to be front and center when I or someone else reads it. So that then goes into what we talked about with endnotes and all of that stuff. But if we look at, yeah, let me ask the question straight back to you guys. Do you, let's say you come up with a cool new thought or idea or invention or something, do you write it down expecting it to get complicated and just have to delete stuff and write it again? Or do you write stuff basically just when you have it fully formulated in your head?
No,
Correct.
I write a stream of conscious. I use Chat GPT without the GPT. I just use Chat. So I annoyed a coworker very much back in 2007 by sort of involving him with my inner monologue. And he's like, "Can you just write this down?" And So I did, and so sort of asking the questions that I would ask another person, rubber ducking. Um, we we used to call the idiot lecture in university. They didn't give us a term, and we just sort of did spontaneously realized how useful it was to sort of act as though you were communicating with another person about something in order to try to come to a conclusion. And I have to say, like, if this generative AI revolution had consisted of nothing other than people realizing that they feigned communication, then that people might already have their billion-dollar industries without any of the water use. But yeah, so and another thing within the creative industry, I was talking to some folks up in San Francisco about this over the weekend, is that one of the problems with the way that image generation works right now is that all of the images that are generated as you're sort of going about trying to take a picture of a cool dog walking along a cyberpunk street, is that in a creative industry, if somebody was tasked with that, and they would be, it's not creative doesn't mean tasteful, is that a lot of the artifacts that people have to build in order to get there are garbage, but they're meaningful. You have these red line kind of sketches where you can kind of adjust the margins, the visual margins of where the 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 graceful Labrador's coat brushes against the glancing light from the street light, and whether or not to be able to put a cool Geordie LaForge style visor on the dog, or if you want to put a little scope over its shoulder, if you do that with individual sort of sketched lines rather than fully realizing them, then they don't presuppose too much about it. They don't overly inform the way that you have the ability to keep the drawing and the idea ambiguous, and by consequence, it's ugly. Like when you become sort of accustomed to it, then you you appreciate the beauty of a good sketch of a good storyboard, but nevertheless, like, so I would be really interested in other domains, like Jonathan. Are Do you have to work with ugly music in order to reason about it, or what are sketches for you?
Um, I know various composers who've some of whom have told me a little bit about how this would be classical music, so we're putting often very long form stuff without not necessarily within a pre-existing structure. So not like a 3-minute song or something with a chorus or something. It could be just something completely free form. Um, more like a painting where you're not necessarily, sorry, I've got a little light here, where you're not necessarily in a way you can do anything. And often the way they sketch, I suppose it's much like sketching a novel. They sketch at the big scale and they sketch at the small scale. So they might have an idea of how long the thing is going to be and what instruments will be playing from symphony orchestra or whatever. In fact, you almost have to have that to start. And then they'd be perhaps writing very small things, which would be a very small tune or just something even smaller than a tune or harmony, sort of groups of notes put down. And so it's just like anything. It's like would be like a novel where you might have a character without actually deciding at all what that character is going to do, or only in the very general sense, or a bunch of characters. And you might have some plot points without knowing how they, or a scene without actually knowing how they would go together. I'm sure screenplays for films are done the same way.
I'm going to show you
So,
something to spur the discussion. Please don't stop talking.
I mean, I'll just if I just burble on a bit. I mean, but you can see what we're talking here is human algorithms for creating an end product. The end product might be a work, which might be factual or non-factual. And as we know from, programming techniques, there are ways and ways of doing that. You can do, like, if you're writing a game playing program, you can do breadth first search or depth first search, which are analogous to some of these things. So my point is, you can reach the same. Obviously, you can reach the same end result by various routes, and it's just a question of what is the most efficient route. And if we've got humans involved, as we have, so what is the most natural route of reaching your final documents or whatever it is you're going to produce. I think it's fair to say that in the past, people were much more, when writing, people were much more used to writing from the start and just carrying on through. And that's clear from the sketches of writers in the past. Shakespeare, notoriously, he was obviously exceptional in most ways, but he notoriously could write speeches and so on, which have become world famous just continuously from the start without apparently planning them. And that's unusual, but still, I think even people of my parents' generation were much more used to writing letters and so on, just continuously, because dictation was something people had to do. In an office environment, you'd have a secretary perhaps, and you wouldn't be able to type yourself. You would just say what you had to say, maybe make a couple of corrections, and off it would go. I'll stop now.
So that was very useful. The reason I'm showing you this journal entry is how it for the process. So I try to write a little bit about what's going on because it's easy to write. I'm at Starbucks, for crying out loud, right? And this, give it a heading, and then highlighting what would I do? What's the product? The stuff that we talk about. So then I write something I think is really important, and it just disappears because it wasn't important. I try. This is developing what became the presentation show at the beginning today. Flatness of text, frame text. Ideally, I'd like to do blah, blah, blah. Then there's a little bit of Claude stuff because it's just for me. I haven't marked it as being AI because it doesn't matter. It's just my notes. Highlight a thing here, and then it becomes a bit rough. And this piece here is kind of the product of that writing. It became an email, which has been sent and won't be sent. But that's what I mean by like pen on paper type thing. So the two Peters, when you have an idea, do you write something like that, or do you also Shakespeare write the final only?
I'll tend to just jot down enough of a sketch for me to be able to remember what I was thinking at the time until I'm ready to actually formalize it completely.
Yeah, that's the same thing. It's like remember when you wake up in the morning, you try to remember a dream, you write it all down so you're going to forget it by the time you head into the shower or something like that. Like a lot of ideas, good ideas are exactly that sort of thing. It's like, and they may not stick in your brain, or as I get older, maybe if my brain is getting older, I don't know. But no, I, you write your own scratchy notes. You write a couple wiki pages, or you do like you're doing. You just have a linear text thing, core dump, something you can go back over. And then you highlight and bolden things or whatnot, and you start to extract out things to attract your attention next time you go back to it, because you got to let it cook. That they, unconscious and work on it. And you go to the shower, get your coffee, come back and say, "Man, that was a dumb idea, but here's the good one that spins off of it."
Yeah, I'll often say that I'm tasking a background process with working on some problem or something, then go out, garden for a couple hours, come back in, and then I'll just let it all gush out and it'll come as one beautiful, fully formed stream of consciousness that's already polished.
Yeah, that's what people want to do with the AIs. They treat the AIs as their little hindbrains or something, or minions. They'll chew on it a bit, and then I'll come back and you'll have pages and pages of AI generated slop, but within the slop are good links, maybe generated. Hopefully, it's enough to kind of get you out of your rut and come back and give you more raw feed to put into that thing that pops into your head that says, "Here's a crystallized view of something I want to write." But usually you write it down, then you edit the heck out of it. You delete lots of stuff. That's the key.
Once you're at that stage of writing and editing the heck out of it, in what form do you put it? Do you put it as a wiki, as a personal note, or where do you, once it's kind of done, what is it?
It's a page, so it becomes like Google Doc, a wiki page, or whatever, Markdown, whatever I'm writing tool I'm using to kind of capture it. Markdown tends to be kind of normal nowadays just because it's malleable into all sorts of different things easily. Plain text. Oh, now I got to put headings in and bold them. Oh, God, I should just do it. Word documents. Too
Where
much
do-
formatting in Word documents. I don't care about the font. I just want to get the words in.
So once it's written, do you just save it on as a folder on your hard drive, or where does it go?
Yeah, my documents, then hopefully get synced up to or it's a Google Doc and it's shared. If it's a wiki, it's local and you sync it up to your cloud so you don't forget it, or so you can get to it on my phone or my other device. I think that's the local first kind of thing needs to happen both from an intellectual. You don't want to expose my dirty laundry and my secret thoughts to everyone to see by publishing it someplace. But I got representational harm there if people see my incomplete evil thoughts.
Yes.
But
Peter
then
Wasowka,
I'll decide I want to publish them as a blog entry, or a conversation like this in the chat, or that
so it
maybe
becomes
only a
an
dozen people see it.
so it becomes an explicit action to publish at some point in a different media from where you wrote it. So you may write it as,
Yeah.
okay. What about you, Peter W?
I really like that typeset polish that I get from LaTeX, and I have a whole bunch of custom macros. And I basically have my own dedicated document class, and I'm really picky about fine-grained typography and formatting. I love having wide margins with margin notes in them, color-coded, multiple streams of footnotes and citations. So I really go crazy on that, and it looks more like a finished textbook when it comes out.
Where do you put it?
I just save it locally or turn it into a PDF if I'm preparing it for someone else's consumption.
Yeah,
But basically, everything just sort of sits in the documents folder.
because it came up again today, the use case of this. I think the use case probably should be a student writing a paper. So they're learning a bit here, learning a bit there, putting it in, and at a certain point handing it in. So that's why I'm wondering about that process.
Now, if the writing is for a programming project, I tend to write in very small chunks that have a dedicated demo function associated with it so that the code is designed to be able to run standalone directly or to be called and imported as a library by another package. So the individual fragments can run themselves.
You work at Jupyter Notebooks or any of those kind of literate lab notebook kind of things, or is it just code and document
Tinderbox and
separate?
VS Code.
Okay. Yeah, I do a lot in VS Code too, and so the plugins in VS Code act as a lot of my authoring tools and helpful things. Like you can bring in the AI stuff real easy and stuff, and formatting and like I say, Markdown becomes this lingua franca for feeding AIs and generating PDFs and EPUBs off of.
And then I'll tend to consult both Gemini and Grok, but mostly at high level design stuff. When they actually start working with the code, they tend to go off the rails after a couple iterations and break it so badly that I wind up having to gut everything that they put in and start from scratch myself. Really going by hand works the best, just sort of probing them for design options to decide, what's the current state of play in libraries that do whatever, and I'll describe in terms of art, very detail what it is that I want to do, and it will come back with some recommendations. I'll compare both models, see what they say, and then based on that, my own background knowledge and experience, I'll pick what looks like the best choice at the time being. But of course, parameterize everything so that I could always go in and swap out if I need to later on.
So it's kind of variation on write the thing 3 times, throw the first two away. Write the thing again, throw it away, write it again, throw it away. But you can do it faster because the AIs kind of help you deal with a lot of crap, so you can get it done quicker versus have a lot of author ownership pain about throwing away a page or throwing away some code that is working but isn't pretty enough, isn't doesn't have any beauty to it or goodness, whatever you're looking for.
Yeah, like explicitly have a bootstrap stage. And I've even told the AI, right now I'm just working on a bootstrap to get new web to be called and automate the manual calling sequence and all. I'm not keeping this code a long time. It's not going to be a literate program because I'm just trying to bootstrap the literate programming environment to be able to go on and then do a refined, dedicated standalone executable to do this down the road. But for now, again, I just want quick and dirty to get the bootstrapping phase in place. So
So,
that gives the different design choices.
yeah, Jonathan.
Um, uh, I think, Freddie, you're trying to guess at two different things, or maybe one of these two. One issue is what constitutes publishing at some level of finished version of something you're writing, let's say. What is the version of it? And it's true, often people put it into a different form, like a PDF or something, though they don't need to. When it gets confusing is when you don't need to. If you're writing Markdown, which is how I normally write stuff, and then I've decided I've finished a thing, what constitutes finishing it? Well, you could put it online, you could put it in a different place, or but then the issue I think maybe you're really trying to get us to answer is the writing process in effect done in a completely different medium, although digital, from finished products, and I think that's absolutely true. But we just don't have the software for that. Though things like Zettelkastens, mind maps, and so on are all reaching that direction. A medium, a thinking medium, obviously involving at some level text, but probably other things. Could be links, but could be something much more elaborate. So that's your thinking medium, and then the output from that is, let's say, much more like text, just because that's the lingua franca of the world at the moment. So you could envisage, a version of what you're working on or what we're all discussing, which was a medium which didn't in any way pretend to be Markdown or Word document or something like that, although still involves a lot of text, but absolutely explicitly thoughts or drafts or bits of definite stuff and bits of indefinite stuff, which you manipulate and perhaps in a more graphical way. And then quite separately, when you finish, then if you're writing an article, by definition, an article is a PDF, let's say, which cannot be the same medium.
Yeah.
My guess is that's what you're kind of getting at, something like that.
Yeah. So it's a shame that Alan isn't here because he was very pushy in a very good way on paper, large reams of paper. And I do think what I'm talking about here, I want to see if you guys agree with me, is the notion of, especially when you're with someone else, it used to be we would carry pen and paper around. It doesn't happen as much anymore. But to have the convenience of, no, hang on, let me just draw it out for you. A little box and an arrow, and it's like, no, 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 that goes there, and you organize things that way. Because once it's on paper, it's a bit rigid, and you can't digitally take it with you. We don't do it as much. I don't know, but the dream maybe would be something as easy as pen and paper and as flexible. And then when you're done, you just kind of scrunch it up, and suddenly you have a finished Markdown or PDF or whatever it might be. So you kind of lift it up a stage to, you then finesse it so that it looks right for publication. But it's hard because I think we here are trying to solve our problem as, middle-aged people of different degrees. Brandel, I know you're younger. Very different from that of a student who main job literally is to learn stuff that is available in the world. I think we're trying to not learn stuff that's in the world as much as we're trying to figure out new stuff, invent stuff. And that is a very different process, isn't it? Like writing a new piece that isn't only research based is very different from, how does mitochondria work? This kind of stuff has been going in circles, at least in my mind, for quite literally decades now.
I'll throw the example you gave of sketching something or having something in your mind and then sketching it to someone. It sounds a bit like the Freeform app for Mac, which obviously I assume Apple have produced because there have been quite a lot of apps along those lines for sharing sketches and so on. I mean, I've used it a tiny bit. I always feel that I want something more structured than that. Something that is itself kind of semantic in some way. That's why I slightly gravitate towards something like Zettelkasten, though I haven't ever found something which I thought was ideal.
Yeah.
Mind map software isn't bad, but it has its same problems for me.
Yeah, I think mind mapping has part of the problem there is the output, but yeah, we're at the 1 hour mark, and I'm not sure how much longer I'm going to be even semi-coherent. But any thoughts on the kind of stuff? Okay, so the name Google is fantastic because people can say just Google it. It's a verb as well as a company name, right? Oh, I'm going to click on that video, Randall, to watch it when I wake up. 1 second. Paused. Okay. I really think we need to figure out a way where we say, oh, you're dealing with this problem, trying to think this through, just insert the thing we're doing here. I'm developing a second app that is only the map from author, not the writing stuff, called Knowledge Space, which is clearer. Peter Dimitris, that's because of you. You complained about the name, and I'm grateful you did. So that's why I'm doing that. But I mean, the language for the headset is lacking. I mean, there is no. We don't have an equivalent to, just put it on a spreadsheet. The reason to go on a headset right now, a lot of the music that I've been writing lately, quote unquote writing music, we all know it's how it's made. It comes up with these romantic, poetic notions of walking in your knowledge. And I really do think there's something there. But then when I put it on and I work with it myself, unless it's really stable, is it really that exciting? And what kind of stuff would compel me to actually do that, and at what stage? I don't think we figured that out yet, and it's a very fascinating problem. Knowledge work, I like that.
I don't know. We just got to figure out the metaphors and then run with it. I mean, what's our hypercard moment here? We have something stupid and simple, the nodes or the books or the page, whatever you call the tabs that are floating around in space. You got a bunch of browser tabs floating in space. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. And the tabs are nodes and they can furl and unfurl. But how are you going to spatially organize them?
Yeah, if you have to walk forward a couple steps because you have to reserve new space for your browser window, even if they're not all open, then you know that this browser window is open here in space, and so I need to walk 6 feet over there in order to get a space for a new tab. That could be pretty awesome. You unfurl things by actually physically uncovering them, and so there is a one-to-one mapping for a given session, at least, of where these things are. It means that pages are probably better off unfurling horizontally rather than vertically. You end up with these kind of Chinese scroll or Japanese scroll style things, because you open them up at certain levels. But that could be pretty cool.
Furl
You
is a
have
good name. I use the word fold. Furl is much more poetic. Now, one thing I didn't really highlight in the presentation in the beginning is that when things are smallified, I don't want to say minimized because that's so desktop language, right? But when it's furled, not unfurled, but furled or folded or minimized or whatever, two important questions is what should it show, which we've discussed several times, of course, and also what should be in it that communicates outwards. If you select it, what are the attributes of this that show you relationship with other things in the space, right?
I'm thinking when I look at what you got, the little text. Okay, there's the function is there. Oh, there's text and it furls and unfurls. It's a page or it's would be a wall of a cube if you flatten it that way. Whatever it is, you got those little bits. I think to make it both palatable but also identifiable at a glance, if it's a stack of papers that's like a book, like something you've authored, put like a book binder around it, do the skeuomorphic thing, have a little bit of a glyph around the edges. It doesn't need to be too fancy, but so that when you glance over, you see a little brown spine. Oh, that's a book. Here's a spiral thing. Oh, that's my notes I'm taking or something. Having those things have more than just the squares. I mean, and I think having more than just the squares floating in space is really important, both psychologically and plus it'll drive some interesting ways of interacting with it that we don't have by saying, oh, now I've got a graph. I explode a bunch of nodes. Every concept is just a little flat rectangle. Well, let's classify them maybe. Put a blue border around all the ones that are related to this topic or something. Use the graphical parts because we're not doing I haven't seen enough of that other than in video games, which go the other way entirely, which is, everything's about the graphics and then the content of the glyph is just, details to make it look like a human or a Pokemon or whatever the heck it is.
So I'm very glad you said that because I'm a bit wary of just using colors. So here's something that I wrote in the 90s. 95, where a picture has a picture frame on the desktop. A video has sprockets. Right. So I strongly agree with what you're saying. And of course, you can do things like that. Different size, relatively speaking. If it's documents, this one has a binder. Well, not a. Yeah, and I think that's very, very important to do.
I was working a bit on that in my little 3D stuff before I got sidetracked by life taking over. Just trying to figure out a way to do that. In my case, it was I got these federated wiki nodes all linking to each other, and which ones go foreground or background, or which ones are important. Tagging them, we tag them with color in that environment. There's a lot more to do with the graphical nature of it. You don't want to turn it into a video game, but you do want to have some of that visual gimmickry. The gimmicks. It's more than a gimmick, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Or it'll become more than that.
Absolutely. Peter W., please go ahead.
Yeah, Tinderbox has an interesting option where you can have notes yellow with age. So the notes icon gets more of a yellow tint over time.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. That's how my father worked. He worked very much based on fax paper. And the fact that fax paper would yellow over time was very useful for him. So that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, no, definitely. There are ways to make them more visual in iconic form, so to speak, and we should do that right now. I'm not really. It may be possible because they're rewriting the whole node system to make it more flexible. I think it's super important that when you open a node, you get a large amount of text properly formatted so you can read it pleasant and then you can edit it. That's what they're doing now. So that's the basic, but we still have the question of why the heck should anyone put on the headset to play with these things? Other than the fact that it's amazing. Like when I was at the Voyager office and a few people went through it. And of course, we took the video of the Vision Pro and put it on the big display in the office so you can see what they were doing. Being able to move a piece of knowledge in space is always a WOW moment. It's always wow. Now we have to figure out the what, Peter.
Yeah, in law school, there was an urban legend that there was a TA who would grade assignments by throwing them outward, and assignments that had more pages of paper in them would have more mass, and they'd wind up going farther when thrown than lighter ones, and that the grades were based upon how far away they were when they landed.
Yeah, that's cool. Hang on, I'm going to show you something else from that page. Did you see the image here on the right? So that's supposed to show a flat screen, but the dimensionality behind it, that's obviously something we can do now. It's always fun to go back to earlier things. Yeah, also blogging. Blogging is a fantastic thing, but I think it's become overcomplicated. But imagine, I mean, maybe blogging really is actually where it's at. Maybe what we're talking about is each little one of these is a blog post. And this really is a browser we're talking about.
For my work, I'm kind of using each node is an iframe because I can use the browser-based controls in 3D. And I try to avoid doing too much sophisticated stuff, but the iframe could be a whole app. When you expand it out, it's a whole wiki or a whole Jupyter notebook. But in reality, I want to have those be um, glyphy and gimmicky and enough, and just expand just like we're talking about here. It's just some text and enough to furl and unfurl to something that fits in the space versus you unfurl it and it becomes a whole nother room you enter into. It's a portal, basically. And I think that's another variation. I mean, you could have the nodes be, hey, this is a portal node. You open it up, you're going to enter a whole new, stick your head in a whole new world. And right now I do that with flat things because I'm putting Jupyter notebooks and wiki pages and blogs and stuff like that as nodes in this 3D space.
This was the original page for HyperWords, which was a system where you select text in a blog. You would get a little dot come up and it would give you a menu where the notion was that you can follow straight links or you could select any text and go in any direction. I'm realizing more and more that that's partly what we're talking about. I think Brandl's been driving at this quite heavily. Because if you compare this and this, this is tabs today. But what if you really could pull things into space while reading, for whatever reason?
Are you creating transclusions? You're doing Ted Nelson's idea.
It was, I think this, yeah, that's dead. No, this is not based on that. It's based on this. So you select text, you get a menu to look it up. Right, that's why it has all these different options for where to go. So this is
Okay, yeah, it's like right click.
no, it's not right click. So I can't remember when I developed this, but okay. So let's say we have we want to look this up in Wikipedia, no, web browser. Look it up in Wikipedia, right? So you do references, Wikipedia.
But it is like right click. I think the point still stands that it is a set of operations that you can undertake arbitrarily on a range of content, and you've created a new context menu that you have the ability to add and augment with the kinds of actions that you think are relevant to collect together like a Swiss Army knife.
I like the fact you got that complete menu and the little user interface for it. It's a nice gadget.
Wow. So this is 15 years ago.
Oh, yeah, I mean, not this stuff, just like you say, 90s, this was being talked about when graphical web was still kind of like, wow, you can do images.
So you just touch the little dots. And that was before the blue square in other browsers. It was quite fun because you had a huge amount of options. So yeah, you see, very very basic visually. This was when Doug saw it.
Yeah, the paragraph.
That's not the whole paragraph?
Yeah, the first paragraph. That's okay, just do it again.
How long ago was that? Just 8 since I
Then point
posted
and
it.
go down to view, almost at the bottom. And then you go to flow, which is in the middle. And click. And now it reorganized it.
Okay. Very proud.
That was lovely. This one actually shows what it does. Thank you guys for indulging me here.
This is great stuff. I hadn't seen any of this. So.
Yeah, it died in Chrome because there was something in the code after 1 million downloads that some no, sorry, Firefox admin said shouldn't be there, and I couldn't afford to redevelop it because it was free. Because we could also on the web translate in situ. Right, so you see this now, the text itself changes on a web page. That was a long time ago. And conversions and so on. Yeah, anyway.
Well, now you hold your phone at arm's length and just point it at it, and
yes, yeah. The translation app is really phenomenal. Traveling in both in China and Japan, it's just the menu, you read it, and yeah, we're living in the sci-fi future from when that was. But okay,
dystopian one maybe.
Well,
thanks for showing off that old stuff.
Yeah, thank you for looking at it. It's good to be reminded. When you, Peter, mentioned framing, I had an idea way back that when you save a document, you should be able to give it a cover page. If you're writing a note, very different from your final thesis. So when you're on the Finder, it should tell you. That's definitely part of what we need to be doing spatially as well.
Yeah.
So Peter, you say that the smartphone is doing much the same thing. I mean, I agree at some level in the sense that, to your point, Frodo, you are successfully kind of leveraging it for translation and things like that. But I also feel like it has presupposed what you want to do with all of that content a lot more than, for example, if you really did have that context menu. You really did have that sort of Swiss Army knife rather than the presumption that it knows what the top tool is for a given moment. And I miss that because I think that there is an instrumentality that is always important for us to be able to reach for, so to speak, where we have this kind of range of things and we actually see the options that are ahead of us, the things that we might be able to make use of in order to envision, like, well, what might it be if we add this to that or other things like that. Like sometimes those things are nonsensical. You probably shouldn't use a corkscrew on a cat, but like the reality of having that domain of options available to you and to be able to kind of consider what the practical consequences are, I think is really important. I know that. So I built a thing many years ago, probably sort of similar timing to your browser plugin there, Frodo, that I wrote was a hierarchical tree-based browser history viewer, such that you were able to see the branching and the switching between different tabs and things like that. And very recently, I read from a former designer at Chromium or on the Chrome project, that they had that same kind of discussion back in the day. Like, how should we present browser history? Wouldn't it be cool if we did this? And they were like, ultimately, no, actually, we don't want to show all of that complexity. We'll just want to do the smart thing. And I just think that's the hubris of that is really both striking and emblematic of Google in the worst possible way. This idea that, no, we'll just do the thing that you should do, I think is such a stripping of agency on the part of the person there. Well, like maybe we can structure it so that there are reasonable choices, but the thing that I've always heard within the company that I work at is that we should provide progressive disclosure, where you have the top option, but you retain the sort of the range of options that may be relevant, with a progressive kind of presentation of different things with additional context in order for people to kind of clarify through some kind of meaningful dialogue, not necessarily dialogue boxes, why they might want to do this kind of thing with that kind of content. Yeah, it was just striking. It was devastating, and yeah, sort of very relieving. Again, for me to realize that it was for the best that I ended up where I ended up instead of one of the other Silicon Valley tech giants.
I think that's really important, Brandel. While I'm listening to you, I'm fiddling with my cursor here, and one thing I've done is put the clock in the bar, whatever's the dock, and the clock says what time it is. That's a great example of progressive disclosure. It's not a flat icon, it's an active icon. Now, just have to show you guys also this. This was also one of those very old ideas, but it is, instead of having just a menu down, it was a menu around. So you could spatialize where this has been done many places since, especially in things like Blender. But the idea is that if you select and you go up, left, up, right, down, you know where the commands are going to be without thinking too hard, and the results can appear. Look how old this interface is. The results would appear near there if you did. So I'm just wondering if maybe in context of what we're talking about here, if when you interact with a node in space, that can be, I know it sounds boring, but a lot of buttons around it. So you have a set of buttons on each side for different kinds of things. There's the edit, delete things, there's the share things or whatever. And Brandel, maybe trails should be part of that. Where has this been? Where have I been? What's the knowledge from? Yeah, exactly. It's become pie menu. Oh, cool.
I'm thinking there's two different modes here. One is, okay, I point at the object, right button click, I get this super menu. I can choose what to do, maybe prioritize it. So it puts the ones I most frequently use at the top, so I don't have to go searching for wherever it is. However that little system works. But there's the other one that's like the iPhone translator. I'm picking up a tool. I want to translate this. You pick it up and you kind of wave your magic wand and you're kind of looking at it as you're doing it, and it's doing the work. So I think in the 3D space, I've seen that used to good effect where, pick up the tool, the scanner or the translator, and you just wave it over things. Or you take the expander and wherever you're looking. And I think that you got some interesting things with the gaze management of Vision OS. When you actually move your eyeball to something, it unfurls automatically, or you get the progressive exposure done. That may or may not be useful because you don't want, as you move your eyes around, you don't want things exploding all over the place. It just gets you dizzy. But I think holding on to a tool and applying that to the view, like a portal or something like that, like you're holding a tablet or a picture frame in front of your face, kind of like in that diagram you had with the 2D, 3D, you're holding this little thing and you're getting a different view of the same set of nodes, the same text sitting out there. Might be a useful way of kind of segmenting the tools. You can always drop back to the context menu and pick out out of the dozens of options, one of the more neater ones. But I think that's one of the interface things that I think works good for, particularly if you got free hand motion.
Yeah, so absolutely. And there's so many interesting ideas here. Now, more specifically, the request that I have given to Apple's employers is to be able to put commands on things, which can't be done currently, as far as we can tell. If it can be done, hopefully they'll get back to us and we're idiots and great, we do it. Second thing is toolbar, and the third thing is being able to open external things. To not be able to open things is a bit of a bottleneck, so to speak. And then we can look at making it more spatial. But I think we are trying to tease this young university student who was overwhelmed with learning and creating, to give that person a space where they can use their whatever digital device, do some of their getting things down. And then when they put on the headset, it's a little bit about opening it up and mirroring a desktop. It should be possible, but it shouldn't be primary interaction. Primary interaction is probably when it's furled or folded or whatever, to see how it relates to other things. I still think we have
Yeah.
a ways to go to figure out how that's actually going to be beneficial beyond being just super cool.
Yeah. Well, if I think back to a college student, and I mean, my daughter's only 13, so it's a while away, but it's at least in sort of visible distance as opposed to having a toddler or a 10-year-old. One of the big differences in like when you are sort of approaching some material, a textbook chapter or other things like that, like there's a big difference between the stuff that you haven't been across at all and the stuff that you have read. So there's this sort of the read state of something is absolutely essential. But there's also this real divide between something that you have not just read, but sort of apprehended on your own terms, being able to expand or annotate and things. And we've had a number of discussions here about the pretty divergent ways in which people relate to texts, whether they put sticky notes in them, whether they draw them, whether they draw on them, whether they dog-ear them, and things like that. And a lot of that comes down to sort of a mixture of personal preference and the level of sort of entitlement people have. I don't mean that pejoratively, over their ability to manipulate the text. Um, and so, I think that there's a whole gamut of ways in which people can kind of um, can relate, but in a world where it's understood and sort of socially understood that things no longer need be sacrosanct, then that idea of being able to take ownership, responsibility, sort of to be able to mark one's own territory essentially over a piece of text, I think would be a really interesting thing to be able to give, because at that sort of stage in a student's life, they own so little, they have so little real estate, particularly if they're in something like a dorm or a group housing kind of situation, and there's not a lot that's theirs. And so that sense of ownership and responsibility and other things like that, there are sort of core concepts of agency that could be really interesting to pull on, in terms of like, this exists, but now this part is mine. This is my interpretation of it. This is kind of a record of my attention to it. And I don't know, I find that really compelling as a thought to pull on.
That also goes maybe towards the notion of a knowledge culture, not using that language, where the student puts on the headset and their whole dorm room is theirs. It's not just something in a notebook or a laptop. It's there. By the way, the MacBook Neo, Emily's cousin here, he just bought one, and I played with it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I'm excited and scared by like how on earth is Apple going to be able to make enough of these damn things for the upcoming 26-27 school year is something that I think is going to be a very exciting challenge.
They've destroyed PCs. The high end
Well,
and the low end. It's crazy.
they cost less than a phone, don't they? I mean,
What's that?
I was saying you get $100 discount, I believe, as a
Uh-huh.
student, and so it costs less than almost any phone, or as far as I can see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the US, it'll appear a bit more expensive.
But I mean, as a dream workflow, to be able to sit with your laptop anywhere, write your stuffy, what you've learned or whatever, notes or whatever we call it, and then put on your headset and it's there in a small form with everything else you have in a persistent way. And then if you need to properly edit that thing, you can. You don't have to leave. You don't have to, it's not a sub thing. I mean, one thing Dini talked about a lot, which I fully agreed with, is this notion of born digital. When we're talking about spatial stuff, it should be spatial first. But this is where you should have the richest interaction with it. Everything else should be supported, of course. I still think it's we're getting close to something, and because I'm an older guy, I don't mind writing my thoughts down and spending time. I remember in my younger years, I thought that would be a waste of typing and effort. So to give younger people a feeling of, if you actually bother to write it out or speech to text it or whatever, it has a real tangible, immediate benefit to their thinking, which can be twofold: either help them think, which would be good, or help a teacher understand that this is their work. It's not AI, it's not plagiarized, it's not stolen. By allowing them to present it differently might be useful. But yeah.
Someone should develop a file type, see, with operating system cooperation, where you have to have actually physically typed the text that's in it, and you can't copy anything in. So at the very least, you've at the very least you copy something by hand. And I think we've talked about before, there is a long history of writers learning to write by literally typing out other people's novels. Hunter Thompson started by doing that, I think.
Yeah, I think 2015 or so, I wrote a series of National Novel Writing Month writers, NaNoWriMo writers. And one of them was, you can't copy, you can't paste, you can't cut, you can only type. And just to use that as an exercise, I think that there's a lot there to be able to kind of, to your point, Jonathan, like chew on in terms of writing practices. And I'll often write in a paper book just because of the different sort of materiality of that process. And I think that there are lots of different sort of things that you get by just straight up copying, trying to convince my daughter to learn how to do things on computers. And yeah, I'm reminded that I just spent a really long time copying exactly logos and documents and other things like typesetting and other things like that. Yeah, there were fundamental differences in what you could understand about what a document was once you were actually actually copying the exact details of it. And so, yeah, I think that's absolutely to Thompson's credit. And if you had the ability to copy their process as well, then that would be all the better, actually.
Copying is interesting. As I'm listening to you, I'm now fiddling with the keyboard thing, the thing I have in Author where I can contract stuff. So it shows up as two right angle brackets. Everything else is hidden. It's kind of a way to clean up things. I'm wondering if we could have a spatialize into something else. Anyway, yeah, we're at the 1.5 hour mark, and I thank you. Gonna go try not to wake the family. Really appreciate today. It's going to be a lot of thinking based on this. I look forward to Monday. I'll be back in London, so that'll be easier.
Have a good week.
Yeah,
Enjoy.
everybody have a good
Safe
week.
travels.
Thank you. Any final thoughts you want to get on the record today?
I thought Peter's point about having, however it's done or whatever it represents, graphical differentiation between rectangles full of text I mean, obviously, this has been done very badly in lots of programs, but if you can do something really useful, I think that's fabulous. A wall of text is something I hate to see because I know I'm going to have to read it.
One of the things, when you say that, Jonathan, a lot of people are complaining rightly that with AI text, who's going to read it? One of the reasons I really like Claude is the typography is fantastic. When I get responses from Claude, I can easily skim them and read. It's really well done, just in terms of my eyes. So even in the age of AI, typography matters. Obviously, I know you all agree with that, but just since you said that. Anyway, thank you guys, and see you in a week. Bye for now.
Bye bye.
Bye.